The galactic arena was unlike anything Commander Ethan Voss had ever seen. It was a massive oval structure that floated in orbit above the planet Valara Prime, held together by shimmering force fields and pillars of alien steel. Rows upon rows of alien spectators filled the towering stands, each species more strange and colorful than the last. Some had shimmering scales, some had soft fur, some glowed faintly under the arena's light, but all of them were loud. The sound was a storm, roars, whistles, thundering feet, and alien chants in dozens of languages. Huge banners fluttered in the artificial wind, displaying the crests of different worlds. The air shimmered with the heat from the battlegrounds below, where two champions were finishing a match. Ethan stood among a small group of human diplomats in the special viewing balcony. They were guests of honor, here to witness the Games of the Crown, a tournament older than most civilizations in the galaxy. It was a spectacle of strength, skill, and courage, watched by millions across the stars. Humans were rare here. Most came for trade talks, science exchange, or cultural displays, not to watch warriors clash. But the Valeri were allies in name only. Their politics were unpredictable, and their traditions even more so. Today, the stakes were higher than ever. The ruler of the Valeri, Queen Seralith, had entered the tournament herself, a rare and risky move for a monarch. The reason was simple. The winner of the games had the right to claim any prize the council could offer. It could be land, resources, rare technology, or, if they wished, something far more unusual. Ethan adjusted the collar of his uniform, feeling slightly out of place. He was a commander in the Earth fleet, sent here for diplomacy, not combat. His mission was to make sure Earth's relationship with the Valeri stayed friendly. Still, he couldn't help but be curious about this event. The match ended below with a flash of steel and a roar from the crowd. The loser, a hulking reptilian warrior, fell to one knee, defeated. Across from him stood Queen Seralith. She was tall and graceful, her armor a deep silver blue that caught the arena's lights. Her long hair, black with streaks of silver, flowed behind her like a shadow. She raised her spear, saluting the crowd. There was no doubt she was a warrior. Every movement was controlled, every strike precise. The Valeri adored her, but they also feared her. She was known not just for her skill in battle, but for her ability to outthink her rivals. The announcer's voice, deep and metallic, echoed across the arena. Victory to Queen Seralith of House Vera. By ancient right, she may now choose her prize. The crowd erupted again. Everyone expected her to demand something valuable, a new fleet of ships, a rare mineral from a neighboring star, maybe the loyalty of another noble house. Seralith turned slowly, her gaze scanning the audience. Her eyes were a striking shade of silver, sharp enough to make even the bravest warrior uneasy. Ethan noticed her glance pass over the council seats, then the merchant's gallery. And then, to his surprise, her eyes locked on the human delegation, on him. For a moment, he thought she was just curious. After all, humans were still newcomers to this part of the galaxy. But then she raised one hand and pointed. Her voice rang out, strong and clear. "I demand a human." Gasps rippled through the stands. The alien crowd began whispering and shouting in their own languages. The other council members looked shocked, some even offended. Ethan's fellow diplomats exchanged confused glances. Surely she didn't mean. Then she spoke again. "I choose him." The spotlight from the arena's hovering drones shifted, bathing Ethan in a bright glow. He froze. "Me?" he whispered, looking around, as if maybe there was another human standing behind him. But no, every eye in the arena was on him. The announcer's voice returned, almost hesitant. "The Queen has chosen Commander Ethan Voss of Earth as her prize." Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't part of the plan. He had no idea why she wanted him, or what being a prize even meant in Valeri tradition. Two tall Valari guards approached the balcony, their silver armor shining. They didn't grab him, but their presence was clear. They were here to escort him. Ambassador Keller, the leader of the human delegation, whispered urgently, "Commander, go with them. Don't make a scene. We'll handle the politics later." Ethan took a slow breath, trying to keep his expression calm. The last thing he wanted was to insult an alien queen in front of millions of witnesses. He followed the guards down a spiraling staircase, the sound of the crowd still thundering above. His mind raced. Why him? He was a military officer, yes, but he wasn't the strongest or the fastest. He had never even spoken to Saralith before today, and yet she had chosen him, in front of everyone. The path led into the heart of the arena, past massive gates carved with ancient Valari symbols. They entered a grand hall lit by tall crystal torches. At the far end stood Queen Saralith, her armor now set aside, replaced by a flowing dark robe with silver embroidery. She looked every bit as commanding off the battlefield as she did on it. Ethan stopped a respectful distance away. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I don't understand. Why did you choose me?" For a moment she simply studied him. Her eyes were unreadable, her expression calm but calculating. Finally, she spoke. "Because you are human." He frowned, slightly. "I don't follow." Her voice lowered, though it still carried authority. "In the old stories of my people, humans are said to be unpredictable, impossible to break. In times of war, that is a weapon more valuable than any fleet or fortress." Ethan wasn't sure whether to feel honored or worried. "So, you see me as a weapon?" Her lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "I see you as something my enemies will not understand. And that, Commander Voss, makes you dangerous to them." Before he could reply, a distant horn sounded, announcing the next event in the games. Saralith turned toward the sound. "You will remain as my guest. For now." Ethan glanced toward the hall's massive doors, then back at the Queen. Guest, or not, he had the uneasy feeling that whatever came next would change his life forever. Ethan was led through long, echoing corridors deep inside the royal palace. The Valeri guards walked with perfect precision, their heavy boots tapping in unison against the polished stone floor. The walls were decorated with tall banners showing the Queen's crest. A silver hawk with wings spread wide over a star. The palace felt ancient, but alive. Blue fire burned quietly in crystal torches along the hallways. Strange music echoed faintly from somewhere far away, carried by the cool, fragrant air. Every few steps, Ethan caught sight of alien servants bowing as the guards passed, their eyes curious as they glanced at the human walking among them. At last, the guards stopped before a large set of doors carved with detailed patterns of battles and victories. One guard struck the floor with the base of his spear, and the doors swung open. Inside was a wide chamber lit by soft golden light. The floor was covered in thick rugs woven with strange symbols. Tall windows looked out over the city, where towers of silver and glass rose into the alien sky. Queen Saralith sat in a tall chair at the far end, no longer wearing her battle armor. Instead, she wore a dark robe with silver trim, her silver eyes reflecting the light like mirrors. A long table. Beside her was set with dishes of fruit, bread, and colorful drinks. The guards stepped aside, and one of them spoke in a formal voice. "Your Majesty, the human you claimed." Saralith rose smoothly from her chair and walked toward him. She moved like a hunter, calm, confident, always watching. "Commander Ethan Voss," she said, her voice steady. "Welcome to my home, Ethan." Gave a small nod. "Thank you, I think." The Queen tilted her head slightly, studying him. "You do not seem pleased to be here." He hesitated. It's just, I'm not sure what this means. Back on Earth, being called someone's prize usually isn't a normal part of diplomacy. A faint smile touched her lips. In my culture, it is not an insult. It is a statement of value. She stepped closer, her gaze sharp. When a warrior wins in the games, they claim something that will strengthen their position. I chose you because I believe you can do that. Ethan kept his tone careful. I'm honored, Your Majesty, but I'm not a politician, and I'm not exactly a trophy to display. That is why you interest me, she said. You are a soldier, yet you carry yourself with restraint. You are young for a commander, yet you look at me without fear. She began walking slowly around him, as if examining a new weapon. Most beings flinch when I stand this close. Ethan didn't move. Fear isn't useful in diplomacy. Respect is. That made her stop. For the first time, her eyes softened, if only a little. Spoken like someone who understands leadership. A servant entered quietly, setting down a tray of food between them. Sarilith gestured toward the table. Eat. We will talk. Ethan sat across from her, feeling the eyes of the guards at the edge of the room. The food was strange but pleasant. Sweet, purple fruit, bread that tasted faintly of cinnamon, and a pale drink that was both cool and warm at the same time. As they ate, Sarilith asked questions, not about Earth's armies or politics, but about its people, its culture, its history. Ethan answered simply, keeping his words clear. She seemed especially interested in stories of human endurance, explorers who crossed oceans, astronauts who risked their lives to reach new worlds, soldiers who refused to give up even when outnumbered. When he finished one such story, she leaned back in her chair. This is why I chose you. Humans are different. My enemies expect strength in the form of armies and ships. They do not expect a single human to stand in my court, reminding them that courage does not need size. Ethan folded his arms. So I'm here to be a symbol? Yes, she said plainly. A living reminder. But not just that. You will also learn. You will see my kingdom from within. You will understand our ways, our politics, our challenges. If you succeed, you will be more than a prize. You will be an ally. The word ally eased some of the tightness in his chest. And if I refuse? She didn't smile this time. Then you return to Earth. But you will leave knowing that you turned away from something important. There was no threat in her voice, just certainty. Ethan took a slow breath. I'll stay, for now. But I want to understand exactly what's going on here. You will, Sarilith said, sooner than you think. That night, Ethan was given his own quarters inside the palace. The room was spacious, with a wide bed, a desk made of some dark, polished wood, and a balcony overlooking the city. Lights from the streets below glowed like rivers of gold under the alien night sky. As he stood outside, leaning on the balcony rail, he tried to make sense of the day. This morning, he had been a guest at a tournament. By evening, he had been chosen by an alien queen in front of millions. There were still too many questions. Why did she need a human now? What threat was she facing that made his presence so valuable? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. A young Valari attendant entered, carrying a folded piece of dark cloth. The queen requests, you wear this tomorrow, the attendant said politely. It is a ceremonial tunic. You will be joining her in the High Council chamber. Ethan accepted the garment. High Council? Yes, the attendant replied. The leaders of the noble houses will meet to discuss the queen's choice. That didn't sound like a friendly meeting. And they're not all going to be happy about it, are they? The attendant hesitated, then gave a slight bow. Some may not be pleased, but the queen does not fear them. When the attendant Left, Ethan placed the tunic on the desk. It was black, with silver thread running in sharp geometric patterns. The stitching alone must have taken weeks. He sat on the bed, staring at the tunic. Whatever tomorrow brought, it was clear that Saralith's choice had caused a stir, and he was now at the center of it, far away. In the tallest spire of the palace, Queen Saralith stood alone in her private chamber, looking out at the same night sky. Her hand rested on the hilt of a ceremonial blade. She knew the council would challenge her decision. She also knew that keeping the human close would send a message, one her enemies would not soon forget. In the quiet of the palace, two different minds, one human, one Valerie, were preparing for the same day ahead, and neither yet knew just how dangerous that day would be. Morning in the Valari capital began with a soft golden light spilling across the city's towers. From his balcony, Ethan watched as the streets far below filled with people, their movements organized yet full of energy. The hum of flying craft passed overhead, and banners bearing the Queen's crest fluttered in the wind. Today was the day of the High Council meeting. Ethan didn't need anyone to tell him it would not be friendly. The Queen's choice of him had stirred the palace. Servants whispered in corners, and guards exchanged short, quiet looks as he walked past. He dressed in the ceremonial tunic the Queen had sent, a black garment with silver stitching in sharp, angular designs. The silver hawk crest over the heart gleamed faintly in the morning light. As he adjusted the collar, there was a knock at the door. Two palace guards stood outside. "The Queen requests your presence," one said. They led him through a series of corridors, each more grand than the last, until they reached a towering set of double doors. Behind them lay the High Council chamber. The doors opened with a deep sound, revealing a vast, circular hall. The floor was polished black stone, reflecting the glow of hanging crystal lights. Around the chamber stood 12 raised platforms, each occupied by a noble house's leader. They were an imposing sight, tall Valeri in richly decorated robes, each with a distinct crest on their shoulder. At the center of the chamber stood Queen Saralith, dressed in her royal armor, sleek silver-blue plates over dark cloth, her long black and silver hair tied back. Her silver eyes were calm, but sharp, as if she expected every word in this room to be a challenge. When Ethan entered, all eyes turned to him. The weight of their stares was heavy. Some looked curious, others openly doubtful. One older noble, in crimson robes, narrowed his eyes, clearly displeased. The Queen motioned for Ethan to stand beside her. "Commander Voss," she said in a clear voice, "you will stand as witness today." He took his place at her side, resisting the urge to fidget under the silent judgment of the nobles. The meeting began with formal greetings and the reading of recent reports. But it wasn't long before the topic everyone was waiting for came forward. A noble woman in green stepped forward from her platform. "Your Majesty, we must speak plainly. You have chosen a human as your prize in the games." Her tone was respectful, but the pause before human made her feelings clear. Saralith's gaze was steady. "I have." Another noble, the man in crimson, leaned forward. "And why, Majesty? You could have claimed an entire fleet, or a rare technology to strengthen our borders. Instead, you claim a fragile being from a distant world. What value does he hold here?" The Queen's voice was calm, but it carried through the chamber. "Humans are not fragile in the ways you think. They are adaptable. They are resilient. In battle, they are unpredictable, qualities our enemies do not understand." She gestured toward Ethan. "Commander Voss represents this strength." A murmur spread through the nobles. Some seemed intrigued, others unconvinced. The man in crimson pressed further. "Majesty, forgive me, but is this not a dangerous distraction?" Our enemies grow bolder at our borders. We should focus on preparing our forces, not entertaining experiments. Ethan stayed silent, but his instincts told him this was more than political disagreement. There was tension here, the kind that hinted at deeper trouble. Saralith's silver eyes narrowed slightly. You speak of preparation, Lord Koresh, yet your fleets remain stationed far from the conflict line. Why is that? Koresh's jaw tightened, but before he could reply, another noble cut in. Perhaps the Queen intends to send this human into battle. A low ripple of laughter came from a few corners of the chamber. Ethan's fists tightened, but he stayed composed. Saralith's voice grew colder. You laugh because you do not understand. That is why you will lose if we do not change our thinking. The chamber fell silent at her words. At that moment, a palace messenger entered, bowing quickly. Your Majesty, urgent news from the outer provinces. A Valari outpost has been attacked. Survivors report an unknown force. The room shifted instantly. Nobles spoke in hurried voices, exchanging worried glances. Saralith stepped forward. Details. The messenger hesitated. The attackers moved fast, with tactics unlike any seen before. They destroyed defenses in minutes. Survivors said they fought as if they knew exactly where to strike. Ethan's mind sharpened. Sounds like someone studied your defenses, he said quietly. Saralith gave a small nod. Commander Voss, your thoughts? All eyes turned to him. He kept his voice clear and simple. If they knew where to strike, then you have a leak. Either someone gave them information, or they've been watching you closely for a long time. A few nobles scoffed, but others shifted uncomfortably. The Queen's expression didn't change. I agree, Lord Koresh spoke sharply. Are we to take military advice from an outsider now? Saralith turned her gaze on him. If that outsider sees what you do not, then yes. The argument might have continued, but the Queen raised a hand. This council is over for today. We will investigate the attack at once. The nobles left one by one, some glaring at Ethan as they passed. Koresh lingered a moment, giving Ethan a long, cold look before turning away. Back in her private war room, Saralith stood over a holographic display of the attacked outpost. Ethan joined her, studying the glowing map. The attackers hit 3 points at once, he noted. Cut communications, took out weapons, then went straight for the command. Center, that's coordinated, military-level thinking. Saralith nodded slowly. And too precise to be random. Which means, Ethan said, whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. For the first time, he saw a shadow of concern in her eyes. This is why I chose you, Commander. My enemies are not just at the gates. They are already inside my walls. Ethan understood now. He wasn't here for ceremony. He was here because something dangerous was moving in the shadows, and the Queen needed someone her enemies couldn't predict. Whatever was coming next, it wouldn't just test the Queen's rule, it would test him too. The palace was buzzing with tension. News of the attack on the outer outpost had spread quickly. In the training yards, soldiers moved with sharper focus. Messengers hurried through the corridors. Guards doubled their patrols. Ethan stood in the Queen's private war room again. The large holographic display showing the outpost's map now replaced by a rotating image of a wide, open arena surrounded by steep cliffs. This, Queen Saralith said, pointing at the image, is the proving ground. An ancient battlefield. When our kingdom faces a challenge to the throne, we settle it through the trial of blades. It is combat, but also a test of strategy. Ethan frowned. You're saying someone challenged your rule? She met his eyes. Lord Koresh. That name didn't surprise him. The crimson-robed noble had made his dislike of both Ethan and the Queen's choice very clear. Saralith continued. He claims my decision to choose you shows weakness. He has called for the trial. If I win, my position is unshaken. If I lose—" Her voice did not finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. Ethan stepped closer to the hologram. "And where do I come in?" Her silver eyes held steady on him. "By tradition, the ruler may bring one chosen ally into the trial. I am bringing you." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "So you want me to fight alongside you against Koresh and whoever he brings?" "Yes," she said simply. "He will expect me to bring my strongest Valari warrior. Instead, I will bring a human. That alone will unsettle him. And if you fight as I have seen you train, it will do more than unsettle. It will win us the, battle." Ethan thought about the hours he'd spent sparring with Valari soldiers over the last few days. They were faster and stronger, but their style was predictable. With planning, he could use that. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it." The proving ground was nothing like the polished arenas Ethan had seen. It was a rough, open space carved into the desert cliffs, where the sun beat down hard and shadows clung to the rock walls. The ground was uneven, scattered with boulders and broken weapons from battles long past. High above, platforms had been built for spectators, nobles, soldiers, and citizens of the capital, all eager to see the trial. Banners whipped in the dry wind. Ethan stepped into the arena alongside Sarilith. She wore her battle armor again, silver-blue plates that gleamed under the harsh sunlight. Her spear rested in her hand, light as if it were part of her. Across the field, Lord Koresh appeared with his champion, a towering Valari warrior in dark red armor, carrying a massive blade. The warrior's shoulders were broad enough to block part of the sun, his steps making the ground vibrate. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Many eyes locked on Ethan, some curious, others amused. He could almost hear the unspoken thoughts. A human against a Valari champion? The trial began with the sounding of a deep horn. Koresh's champion moved first, charging with surprising speed. Sarilith met him head-on, her spear flashing to deflect his strikes. Ethan circled to the side, eyes scanning for an opening. The champion was powerful, but his attacks were heavy and wide, perfect for exploiting. Ethan darted forward, striking at the champion's side with the flat of his blade. It wasn't enough to harm him, but it made the Valari turn, splitting his attention. That was all Sarilith needed. Her spear shot forward, forcing the champion back a step. Koresh himself stepped into the fight, wielding a curved blade. He moved, with the precision of someone who had trained for decades. Ethan blocked his first strike, the impact jarring his arms. Koresh's strength was clear, but Ethan noticed his footwork was too formal, almost rigid. Ethan shifted his stance, using uneven ground to his advantage. He lured Koresh toward a patch of loose gravel. When Koresh stepped on it, his footing faltered for a split second. Ethan's counterstrike sent him stumbling back. The crowd reacted, some gasping, others cheering. The fight continued, a storm of movement and dust. Sarilith and Ethan moved in sync, covering each other's flanks without needing to speak. She struck with precision, he with speed and unpredictability. At one point, the champion swung his massive blade toward Ethan. Instead of blocking directly, Ethan ducked low, letting the swing pass overhead, then slammed his shoulder into the champion's leg. The Valari stumbled, giving Sarilith the opening to land a sharp blow across his armor. Koresh grew more aggressive, his strikes aimed at separating the two. But every time he tried, Ethan slipped back into position. Finally, the moment came. Champion swung again, but Ethan feinted left, making him turn his body just enough to expose his back to Sarilith. She struck hard, knocking the champion's weapon from his hands. The massive blade fell into the sand with a heavy thud. Koresh's eyes widened. His champion disarmed, he was now alone against two opponents. Sarilith advanced slowly, her spear tip aimed at his chest. "Yield, Koresh," she said, her voice carrying across the arena. The noble's jaw tightened, his pride clearly fighting against the truth. But the rules were absolute. Once disarmed and surrounded, defeat was certain. "I yield," he said. At last, the words bitter. The horn sounded again, ending the trial. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, others in shocked silence. The queen had defended her throne, and a human had stood beside her to do it. Sarilith turned to Ethan, her silver eyes softer now. "You fought well, Commander. You proved my choice was not a mistake." Ethan nodded, catching his breath. "Glad. I didn't make you regret it." As they left the proving ground, Ethan noticed Koresh watching them from the shadows of the arena gate. The noble's expression was calm, but his eyes were cold. Ethan knew this fight had not ended the danger. It had only shown the enemy that they would have to try harder. Back in the palace, Sarilith addressed her council briefly. "The trial is settled. My rule stands. And let this be a reminder. Strength comes in many forms." Ethan stood quietly beside her, scanning the faces of the nobles. Some now looked at him with respect, others with calculation. But none looked at him as if he didn't belong. That night, as the city celebrated, Ethan stood on his balcony again. The air was cooler now, carrying the sound of distant music. For the first time since arriving, he felt not just like a visitor, but like part of something larger. But deep inside, he knew the proving ground had only been the first real test. The attack on the outpost was still unanswered, and the Queen's enemies would not rest. The real battle, he thought, hadn't even begun. The victory in the proving ground spread across the capital in hours. Streets filled with music, flags waved from balconies, and citizens shouted the Queen's name. Some even spoke the human's name, Commander Ethan Voss, with respect, a rare thing for someone from beyond the Valari homeworld. But celebrations never last long in a kingdom under threat. 2 days after the trial, word arrived of a second attack. This time not on a small outpost, but on a trade convoy escorted by a Valari patrol ship. The enemy had struck fast, crippled the escort, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Ethan was in the war room with Queen Sarilith when the report came in. The holographic map glowed in the center of the chamber, showing blinking red, markers where the convoy had been attacked. Sarilith studied the map in silence for a moment. "They move like shadows, always hitting where we are weakest." Ethan leaned on the table. "They're not choosing random targets. First the outpost, now the convoy. Both locations weaken your supply lines." The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You think they're preparing for something larger?" "I'd bet on it," Ethan said. "This isn't just raiding. This is the kind of pattern you see before a coordinated strike." A Valari general standing nearby frowned. "If that is true, then we must recall our forces from the borders to defend the capital." Ethan shook his head. "That's exactly what they'll expect. They want you to pull your ships back so they can hit somewhere else without resistance." The general's voice turned sharp. "And what do you suggest, human?" Ethan glanced at Sarilith. "We give them what they expect, but not the way they expect it." Over the next hours, Ethan laid out his plan. The Valari military relied on strength and direct engagement, but Ethan's idea was different. Use false signals, staged weaknesses, and hidden strike teams to lure the attackers into a trap. The Queen listened closely, asking questions, adjusting details with her own knowledge of the enemy's habits. Together they shaped the plan until it was sharp and simple. By nightfall, orders were sent. Small patrol ships began broadcasting fake distress signals in specific sectors. Cargo vessels were positioned to look vulnerable, but carried elite soldiers, hidden in their holds. The Valari fleet shifted, not back toward the capital, but into quiet positions just outside enemy sensor range. Ethan knew it was risky. If the enemy realized the trap too soon, they could vanish into space again. But if they took the bait, the Valari could strike back hard. 2 days later, the trap was set. From the command deck of the Vera's Spear, the Queen's flagship, Ethan stood beside Sarilith watching the tactical display. One of the vulnerable cargo ships drifted in open space, its lights dimmed, its engines running at low power. To any scanner, it looked like an easy target. Then, just as planned, a ripple of movement appeared on the edge of the sensors. Small enemy ships, sleek, fast, and black against the stars, slid into view. "They're taking the bait," Ethan said quietly. Sarilith gave a small nod. "Signal the hidden teams. Hold position until they are fully committed." The enemy moved closer, scanning the damaged ship. When they were within striking distance, the trap snapped shut. From behind the nearest asteroid field, two Valari strike ships roared into view, weapons already locked on target. The cargo ship's hidden troops surged to life, launching small fighters from concealed bays. The enemy reacted fast, scattering in all directions, but this time they had nowhere to run. Valari ships cut off their escape routes, herding them into a narrow section of space where the flagship waited. "Now," Sarilith said. The flagship's main cannons fired in perfect unison, sending bursts of energy that tore through the enemy formation. Several ships were disabled instantly, their systems going dark. Others tried to fight back, but the sudden, coordinated assault overwhelmed them. On the main screen, one enemy ship stood out. It was larger than the rest, heavily armed and fighting, with desperate precision. "That's their command ship," Ethan said. "Take that out, and the rest will break." The Queen turned to her helmsman. "Bring us in close." The flagship surged forward, weaving through enemy fire. Ethan stood at the weapons station, helping coordinate targeting with the Valari gunners. He called out movements, predicting where the enemy ship would turn before it happened. At the perfect moment, Sarilith's voice rang out. "Fire!" The flagship's forward cannons unleashed a concentrated blast that struck the command ship's engines. The explosion lit up the darkness of space, and the remaining enemy vessels scattered, fleeing into warp space without their leader. The bridge was filled with the sound of Valari officers cheering, but Sarilith's face remained thoughtful. "We won this fight, but they will return. And next time, they may not take the bait." Ethan nodded. "At least now we know they can be beaten." The Queen looked at him for a long moment. "Your plan saved lives today. You think differently. From my commanders, sometimes too differently. But that is exactly what we need." Before Ethan could reply, a comm officer turned from her station. "Majesty, we have captured survivors from the enemy ships. They're being brought aboard now." Sarilith straightened. "Bring them to the holding cells. Commander, join me. I want you there when we question them." The prisoners were not like any species Ethan had seen before. Tall and lean, with pale skin marked by dark lines that seemed almost natural, they wore armor that was smooth and featureless. Their eyes were a strange shade of metallic blue, cold and unblinking. One of them stood silently as Sarilith stepped into the cell. She spoke in a controlled voice. "You attacked my people! Why?" The prisoner didn't answer. His gaze slid to Ethan, lingering for a moment before returning to the Queen. Sarilith's tone sharpened. "Speak!" Finally, the prisoner said, "We are only the first wave. The rest are coming. Your throne will fall, Queen of Valara, and the human will be the first they take." Ethan felt the weight of the words. This wasn't just a raid or a test. It was the beginning of something much larger. The Queen stepped closer to the cell door, her voice calm but edged with steel. "Tell your leaders they will find neither fear nor surrender here." The prisoner gave no reply. Later, walking back through the palace, Ethan glanced at Sarilith. "So, now we know they're coming for you. And for me." She met his eyes. "Yes, which means we prepare not just to defend, but to end this threat before it grows." Ethan felt a strange clarity settle over him. Whatever role he had started, with here as a prize, a curiosity, was gone. Now he was a fighter in the middle of a war that could decide the fate of a world, and the next move would have to be theirs. The palace war room was filled with the quiet hum of machinery. Around the central table, holographic maps showed enemy movements. Red lines marked the latest reports. Scattered raids along the borders. Slow but steady pressure on the Valari kingdom. Ethan stood beside Queen Seralith, arms crossed. The enemy prisoner's warning still echoed in his mind. "We are only the first wave. The rest are coming." "We can't just wait for them to attack again," Ethan said, his voice firm. "They'll keep choosing the time and place. We need to hit them first." Seralith's silver eyes moved across the map. "You mean take the fight to their base?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "Find where they're staging their ships, cut off their supply, and make them pull back. We can't match them in numbers, but we can force them to fight on our terms." A Valari general frowned. "We don't know their location." Ethan pointed to the map. "Not exactly, but we know the direction they always retreat. If we plant trackers on their ships the next time they hit us, we follow them home." Seralith's gaze lingered on the map, then on Ethan. "It's dangerous." "So is waiting," he said simply. 2 days later, the plan was in motion. The Queen's fleet split into smaller patrol groups, each moving through sectors where the enemy was likely to strike. One group carried special tracking devices, small, stealthy drones that could attach to enemy hulls without being detected. Ethan and Seralith were aboard the Vera's Spear, watching the stars slide past on the main screen. The crew was quiet, focused. They all knew what was at stake. When the attack came, it was sudden. 3 enemy ships dropping out of warp in perfect formation. The Vera's Spear turned to meet them, shields flaring as energy fire lit the darkness. "Launch the trackers," Seralith ordered. Small, dart-like drones shot from hidden bays, weaving through enemy fire before vanishing against the black hulls of the attackers. The fight lasted only minutes before the enemy pulled back, vanishing into warp space. Ethan leaned forward. "Are we locked on?" The helmsman nodded. "Yes, Commander. We have their trail." The pursuit led them far from Valari space. Stars grew sparse, and the darkness between them felt heavier. Finally, a massive shadow appeared in the distance. A hidden base built into the side of a dead moon, its surface bristling with weapon turrets and hangar bays. Seralith studied the display. Heavily armed. A direct attack would be suicide. Ethan's mind worked quickly. "Then we don't attack it like a fortress. We make it too dangerous for them to stay." He pointed at the moon's surface. "Those hangars are their lifeline. We disable them. They can't launch enough ships to fight. We use precision strikes, hit and run, no drawn-out battle." The Queen nodded slowly. "We will need perfect timing." Under the cover of the moon's shadows, the Valari fleet split into small attack wings. Ethan rode in one of the fast strike craft alongside Seralith, both wearing lightweight combat armor. As they swept low over the moon's surface, the enemy's defenses came alive. Energy beams cut through the darkness, forcing the Valari ships to weave and dive. Explosions lit the surface as the first hangar was hit, its doors crumpling inward. Ethan's ship banked hard toward the second target. "Almost there," he called over the comm. Turrets swung toward them, spitting fire. Seralith's voice was calm. "Hold steady!" They dropped their payload in a perfect arc. The explosion tore through the hangar's launch bay, sending debris scattering into the void. Across the comms, Valari captains reported similar successes. 3 hangars down, 2 to go. The enemy scrambled to respond, but without full launch capacity, their counterattack was scattered and weak. Then, a warning alarm filled the cockpit. A large enemy warship was breaking from the base, fast and heavily armed. "That's their command ship," Ethan said. "If it escapes, they can regroup." Seralith's eyes narrowed. "Then it does not escape." They turned to intercept, diving straight into the warship's path. Enemy fire blazed around them. but Sarilith's piloting was precise, slipping. Between the bursts, Ethan locked weapons and fired. The warship's shields flared, then broke under the combined fire of the strike craft. A final burst struck its engines, sending it drifting helplessly. The rest of the battle was brief. With their base crippled and their leader's ship disabled, the enemy began retreating. The Volari fleet pulled back before reinforcements could arrive. As the stars of home space filled the screen again, Ethan let out a slow breath. That should buy us time. Sarilith glanced at him. Time to prepare for what comes next. Back in the capital, the Queen stood before the High Council. Her voice was steady, her presence commanding. The enemy sought to weaken us, to divide us. But with the help of Commander Ethan Voss, we struck at their heart. They will not forget this lesson. Some nobles still looked uncertain, but most were silent, their eyes on Ethan as much as on her. For the first time, he felt that they didn't just see a foreigner standing beside their queen. They saw someone who belonged there. That evening, on the palace balcony, the city lights stretched to the horizon. Sarilith stood beside Ethan, the cool night air carrying the distant sound of music from the streets below. "When I chose you in the arena," she said, "many thought it was foolish. Some still do. But today you proved them wrong." Ethan smiled faintly. "I thought I was just a prize." Her eyes softened. "You were never just a prize. You are my ally. And in this war, perhaps the most important one." They stood in silence for a while, watching the twin moons rise over the city. For Ethan, the path ahead was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. He had found a place here, not as an ornament of victory, but as part of something far greater. And somewhere beyond those moons, the enemy was regrouping. But when they came again, the Queen of Valara and the human she had chosen would be ready.